Good morning, everyone. I now officially call the meeting of the United States Trotting Association to order. I'm Ivan Axelrod, Chairman of the Board, and want to welcome all of the directors to Columbus for our annual meeting. I also want to welcome all the guests in attendance and everyone watching and listening as we stream our proceedings this morning across the internet and across the world. We have a full agenda for this morning session, and we'll be sharing much information about our industry from various key industry leaders. A couple of notes before we proceed. All of the directors are encouraged while you're here this weekend to visit the new USTA offices. Arrangements can be made for trips over there, and contact Sally Stauffer if you would like to be part of that. Any director also would like a new picture this year after viewing what's in our book. After we have the group picture before lunch, see Mark Hall and he will take multiple pictures for you, 8x11, glossies, all of those things. And then I want you to remember that this full board meeting this morning is being video streamed through our website. And if you're up asking questions or addressing the chair, please make sure you state your name, speak clearly, and do it at the microphones so everyone will be able to listen to your comments. And the last little note, tomorrow the hospitality room will not be open. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, but before we do that, just a moment, that most of you remember last year Barbara Brooks was not here. She was having some surgery. She is back for her 61st year with the organization. And I just wanted to make note of something that's really tremendous. She has been an anchor, and actually this morning she had a little knife and fixed my jacket. So she is capable of doing anything that is needed at the USTA. Barbara, will you now lead us in the pledge?
Okay. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Barbara. It is customary for us to begin our session with a keynote speaker, and this year is no exception. We are honored to have Ohio State Representative Jim Beeke, who was first elected to the House in 1983. He currently serves as Assistant Majority Floor Leader for the General Assembly, and as a member of the Ohio House, he has dealt heavily with issues important to his constituents, such as agricultural, civil and commercial law, state government, elections, small business, and economic development. He's everywhere. Representative Beeke is the former president and CEO of Beeke Food Service in Greenville, Ohio. He has served as Assistant Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture. He is avid and a visible supporter of harness racing and recognizes the importance that it plays in the economic and agricultural well-being of the state of Ohio. He has also been honored many times for his support for agriculture from groups such as the Farm Bureau, 4-H, and FFA. I am really proud and pleased to present Jim Beeke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Axelrod. I appreciate the privilege to be here this morning. One of the things I want you to know is I learned early in my career not to get a fat head. I'll just give you one little story as to why that is the case. In my first term, I was, of course, as Mr. Axelrod said, I'm from Greenville, over in the western part of Ohio, and I'm a Rotarian. And after my first term, the club invited me to come back and give a State House update. Well, it just so happened the day I was there, when I was a child growing up, I lived around the block from a well-known dentist Dr. Cole. And Dr. Cole was there that day, and he had a visitor with him. And I made my update to the club, and afterwards, as people were talking, Doctor didn't know I was standing right behind him. He didn't see me, and he was talking to his guest, and his guest made a comment that was kind of an interesting talk that Representative Beakey gave. And Doc said, listen, I've known that boy since he grew up. The Beakeys had 3 sons. That one's a politician, and the other 2 didn't amount to much either. So let me tell you, what he didn't also tell you is that I'm a butcher and a sausage maker, and they tell you when you get in government, you never want to see sausage and law made. Well, I've made them both, and sausage is still a whole lot cleaner. So I also, I'm just an old country boy. My grandfather got me hooked on harness racing when I was 15 years old, so that when I got my driver's license, I'd be a chauffeur. And from that point on, I have been a passionate supporter of the industry. I've been a part owner, a broodmare, and part owner of some racehorses. Currently, I don't have any interest at all because the decisions we make in the legislature that affect you, I can't vote for. So when I first came to the House, my closest friend in this industry was Corwin Nixon. And at that time, we were the only 2 guys in the House that knew the front end of a horse from the back end. So, and that is very important as we talk about the future of this industry, the importance of knowing those folks in government that make the decisions. I want you to know that I've also, as Mr. Axelrod said, I've been involved in legislation over the years that affect our industry in Ohio, simulcast racing several years ago, of course, the VLTs, the racinos, the casinos, everything that we can do to help grow our sport, not only in Ohio, but in the country. And I just want to share with you some observations as a lifelong fan of the sport, and knowing that the future bodes well if we make the commitment. It's absolutely imperative that the integrity of this sport continue to be positive. We're attracting new fans, especially in Ohio, and we have to have an entertainment venue in racing that shows the new fans and the existing fans that we have an honest sport, and that what we do is based not only for entertainment to produce revenue, which really comes back to agriculture, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the fans have to know that we have honest racing on the track, that we're respectful to the animals. There's quite a discussion going on, and of course, our opponents, the PETA folks and the HSUS folks, we're under the gun. We're under the microscope at all times, so that the racing that is on the track is done with integrity and respect to the animals. I also want you to know that there has to be emphasis that for the lives of the horses after they're through racing. One of my other involvements is that I've been a board member for years of New Vocations Racehorse Adoption. I see Jerry Hawes out in the audience. He's a board member. Mickey Burke's a board member. Warren Ploss, Mindy Banger. I mean, we've got people who are interested in making sure that when the racing careers are over, that there are indeed second careers. A lot of former racing harness horses are involved in show horsing, and show horses. And so, and that's not only good for the animals, but it's good for the public relations and the positive image that we have to the people who don't know about us. They believe it just adds to the aura of integrity of our sport. As we continue in that vein, we'll continue to expand the fan base. That's what we need, more fans in the stands. Let's talk a minute about marketing and sales. My roots are in Darke County. There are currently in Ohio 65 county fairs that conduct harness racing. I don't think there's any other state in the country that has as many venues as we do here in Ohio, besides our 4 harness tracks. One of my friends that I grew up with, many of you will remember Gene Regal. Gene Regal, in my opinion, is one of the top trainers and judges of horse flesh in the history of the sport. His legacy is incredible to all of us here. Western Hanover, Life Sign, Artiscape, Leah Almahurst, Arnie Almahurst. The list is unbelievable of horses that were broken on the Darke County Fairgrounds track by Gene Regal. He physically built that track to what it is today. It's one of the finest county fair tracks there is. He's the basis of it. He had a 9th grade education. Of course, his parents, Roy and Delilah, were involved in the industry, and they were tragically killed in an auto wreck coming back from Lebanon Raceway one evening. But here's a man that could tell you in 5 minutes if a horse was going to be any good or not. He's like many of you in the audience today. But he was a man of an integrity. There was nothing that Gene Regal wouldn't do to help anybody in the industry. He didn't care who you were. He might have the best horse he was competing against, but if you wanted to know something, he'd tell you. He'd help you. And there are lots of you who are that way. That's how we develop the success of the industry. Well, but the real lasting legacy of Gene Regal is that many of the horses that are trained and raced today are progeny of the horses that I just mentioned and the horses that he had an impact. And quite frankly, when Gene Regal struck up the friendship and the business association with George Siegel, that has had a profound impact on this industry that will last forever. Now, let me talk about what we need to do. We're all having a discussion as to how we expand the industry and get more people involved. And here in Ohio, we're on the upswing, obviously because of the VLTs and the associated things. But when I see Stacy Cahill sitting here, I look at the ownership of Scioto Downs. They took a risk and built a racino before the legislation was even passed. They made investments like that. A lot of people made investments, and as a result, we're expanding our breedings here. In Ohio, of course, will be number one like it was several years ago in the number of foals produced and so on. But why is that? Okay, it's the 4 racetracks, but it's also those 65 county fairs. And that's where I want to go. We need to look at going back to our roots. And I don't know various states that you're from, how many county fairs that you have and how many county fairs that you have racing. But don't ever forget that we're in this room because farmers raced horses a couple hundred years ago. And that started the county fairs. And they were competing and judging in their livestock, and then they raced their horses. If it wasn't that, we wouldn't be here today. So in Ohio, we're going back to focus on that. That's how you build the fan base. Get the kids involved. We've got to get a new generation of people interested in this sport. And by the way, guys like me who look at computers like the little TVs, you know, I'm not too good at Facebook and Twitter and Woofer and all that other stuff, but my aides are, all right? And here's what we need to do is to get more people interested in this sport, particularly the younger generations. We've got to attack it from all aspects, and that means social media, that means doing things that are out of the box, what we're used to in the industry. And the sooner we make those changes, look, we already know that the handle at Scioto is going up because that racino's got people coming outside and seeing horses racing, and they're coming over, and all of a sudden they're betting on the horses. Now here's where it really fans out. Someday, some of those folks that we're creating to be fans are going to be the owners and trainers and drivers and involved in the sport. But if we go back to our roots and focus on the county racing, that will help expand the base. We had the partial futurities that started in the 50s in Darke County. They were racing, the Grand Circuit horses came in. They were racing for $5,000 to $8,000. The fact is, we've had a signature series of races where 16 county fairs in Ohio have been racing 4, 5, 6 aged horses for several years. And then they have a final at Delaware. Well, this year, for the first time, we've got the Ladies Pace Series in Western Ohio. We've got 13 fairs that are racing Ladies Pace, the Ladies Pace. And the points will be the same, similar to what the Signature Series is. There'll be there'll be a final at Delaware. There's a whole pool of people that we've got to get involved, and we can get involved. And when the ladies race, the handle at that race goes this way. People love it. All right? That's the kind of thing that's going to grow the industry, but we can never forget where we came from. And if we do that, I'm telling you, we'll grow and we'll expand and we'll make it interesting, and then we'll make it more profitable and lucrative so that our beloved industry will be something. I just want you to know it's about agriculture. My house district in Ohio produces about 10% of total production agriculture in Ohio. I'm a bologna peddler by trade, but I want to tell you, I've got lots of chickens and turkeys and hogs and horses running around. Dark County's got a big presence in the harness industry in this state. We're within 2 hours of 4 racetracks. So there's a lot of interest in Dark County and racing at Dayton and Monroe and Scioto and Anderson. So I just want you to know that Ohio, the equine industry in Ohio is $1 billion sport, and it should be that way and growing in every state. And we can do it if we continue to seek new ways to expand the base. Fans, bettors, owners, trainers. I've got a young man, he's done fairly well. His name's Jeff Nysonger. He races a lot here in Ohio, and he's from Greenville. And he's a product of a 4-H club. And he went to a 4-H standardbred club as an imitation of a friend, and he didn't know a front end of a horse from the back end when he started that club. But as a result of that, he's made a pretty good career in this business. That's how we grow the business. And then another thing you have to do, and because of us hot-air politicians, you got to develop the relationships with the people that make the decisions. And if it weren't for Governor Kasich, and I see Steve McCoy and John Mossberger and Dick Brandt and Jerry Knappenberger and Skip Hoovler and Bob Schmitz, our chairman of our racing commission, and Governor Kasich and Keith Faber, who's the president of the Senate, and Bill Batchelder. Bill Batchelder was the Speaker of the House, who doesn't gamble. He hates gambling. But he supported this because he knows what our industry means to agriculture. It's the #1 industry in this Ohio, and the equine industry in our business is helping grow that. And it's that way in every state. I use Ohio because that's what I know. But every one of you, wherever you're from, it's the same thing. You've got to focus on the agricultural aspect of it. You've got to focus on getting to know the decision makers. Many of you do. Many of you are well connected, and it's nice to see. I met a state representative from Maine, and it's wonderful that you have people like him who are associated with you here. Point is that the decision makers are the ones, in this business there's 3 words you always pay attention to. Follow the money. That's all. Everything I look at is follow the money. And if you don't think money's important, you can pass riverboat gambling in Indiana, and you can pass VLTs in Ohio, and you can do all the things necessary to grow the pots and grow the purses and grow the interest in the business. But don't ever forget the people that make the decisions. They can take it away just as fast as they gave it to you. Think Illinois, think Michigan, think Canada. It's not a guarantee. It's a subsidy. So let me tell you, you have to know the people that make the decisions so that we will always have our industry's best interest at the heart of the folks that make the government decisions. But it's agriculture, and it grows. I will tell you that it's a privilege for me to be a member of the Ohio House of Representatives. It's a privilege for me to be a long-time standing friend of this, the greatest sport there is. And I thank you for your investment in the industry, and I want you to step back, get up in the 30,000-foot level, and figure out how we can grow and compete against everything else. Have a great meeting. Have a great year. God bless America.
Thank you, Representative Beakey. I found most of those words very challenging for us and kind of a path for us to utilize to strengthen Ohio and strengthen harness racing in general. I appreciate your comments very much. We'll now move on to the official roll call. Ms. Brooks.
Mr. Antonoff? Bonacci? Mr. Ader? Mr. Beagle? Mr. Bianconi? Mr. Biddle? Mr. Bays? Mr. Brandt? Mr. Brandt? Here. Mr. Brennan? Mrs. Brewer-Bertera? Mr. Brown? Mrs. Cahill? Mr. Crawford? Mr. Cross? Mr. Descharnes? Mr. Dunn? Mr. Feraldo? Mr. Ford? Mr. Guterrio? Mr. Gregory? Mr. Halls? Mr. Hubler? Mrs. Ingracia? Mr. Johnston? Mr. Kane? Mr. Kenny? Mr. Kimmelman? Mr. Landis? Mr. Levitt? Mr. Lilly? Mr. McKinnon? Mr. Marine? Mr. Marshall? Mr. McCoy? Mr. McErlane? Dr. Moffitt? Dr. Mossbarger? Mr. Nichols? Mr. Oldford? Mr. O'Toole? Mr. Piney? Mr. Panaccio? Dr. Powers? Mr. Revington? Mr. Reynolds? Mr. Rowland? Mr. Rooney? Mr. Salvey? Mr. Schick? Mr. Snitker? Mr. Settlemoir? Mr. Stratton? Mr. Sweeney? Mr. Tubin? Dr. Walker? Mr. Wan? Mr. Wiles? Mr. Yan? Vice Chairman, Mr. Williams? Chairman, Mr. Axelrod?
Here.
President, Mr. Langley?
Here.
We have 51 directors present. We have a quorum. We'll move forward to conducting our business. Next order of business is the introduction of new directors. This year we have 5, and we'll start with District 2. Chairman Marshall, please introduce your new director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure, and I'm pleased to introduce representing District Number 2, the Race Secretary, Director of Racing from Hoosier Park and the Dam Patch. Newly elected to the United States Trotting Association as a track director, I'd like to introduce the young and upcoming, very talented official, Mr. Scott Piney. Please give a welcome to Mr. Piney.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Welcome. District 6, we have 2 new directors. Mr. Levitt, could you please introduce those? Would you come up to the microphone? Thank you.
We have replaced 2 outstanding directors with 2 other outstanding directors. Jay Sears is no longer director. John Yinger is no longer a director. They both were terrific, both to work with and their contributions to our business. Joe Panaccio has replaced Jay Sears. He's been very, very active with the Horsemen's Organization at Pompano. He does a great job there, and I know he'll do a great job here. John Yinger has been replaced by Brett Revington, who is equally committed to the welfare of our business. He's youthful, he's full of energy, and
I'm sure he also will be the same kind of contributor that John Yinger was. I give you both of them.
Thank you, Chairman Levitt, and welcome Joe and Brett. You'll have an interesting weekend, and I appreciate your efforts to want to participate in this aspect of our organization. Next, from District 9, Don Marine, would you please introduce your new director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce the newest director for District 9, the track director who replaces Paul Fontaine. He's the general manager of the Park Ridge Casino. He spent 40 years in the business. He was a leading driver at Foxborough, Rockingham Park, and Hinsdale Raceway. He's the director of SOA of New England. Steve has an owner, trainer, and driver's experience, as well as a licensed starter and a judge. He's also trained thoroughbred. So join me in welcoming Steve O'Toole to our board.
Welcome, Steve. Thank you. And our final addition for this year in District 12, District Chairman John Brennan.
Mr. Chairman, it's the Meadowlands elected a new director in replacing Alex DeDoyne. And it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Salvi, who's the stakes coordinator for the Meadowlands. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Welcome, Nick. I find it great that we have a continuing evolution of directors and new ones and new blood, and I thank all of you in advance for your participation in the organization at this level. Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation and recognition of service. I have several of these today. First is a proclamation regarding Paul Fontaine. Whereas Paul Fontaine has devoted decades of service to the harness racing industry through his long and diligent service as a director of the United States Trotting Association since 1980, represent members in New England's District 9. Whereas he was elected chairman of the board of the United States Trotting Association and faithfully fulfilled those duties from 1989 to 1996. Whereas he's been a wise and attentive leader in his community as a Rhode Island state senator and in our industry as president of Harness Tracks of America and the Standardbred Owners Association of New England. Whereas in his 4 decades of breeding and racing standardbred horses, he's been associated with Woodrow Wilson winner No Yankee, as well as the crowning achievement of his career, winning the 2013 Hambletonian with royalty for life. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association does hereby grant and confer for all time the title of Director Emeritus of the United States Trotting Association, and offers our sincere thanks and appreciation to Paul Fontaine for his wise and generous counsel, his forthright and unwavering leadership. I don't know that Paul is here this morning, but he will receive a formal plaque this afternoon at our lunch meeting. And I thank Paul for this. Next, whereas Jay Sears has faithfully and conscientiously represented the horsemen and women of the United States Trotting Association District 6 since 1992, whereas his distinguished career as a trainer and driver, a breeding farm and training center operator, has enhanced his ability to represent the needs and concerns of those he represents, whereas his achievements have been acknowledged by induction in the Florida Harness Racing Hall of Fame and recognition as Florida's Breeder of the Year on many occasions, whereas he provided diligent and professional guidance over a decade to Florida horsemen as executive director of the Florida Standardbred Breeders and Owners Association. Herewith, the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association does hereby grant and confer for all time the title of Director Emeritus of the United States Trotting Association, and offers our sincere thanks and appreciation to Jay Sears for his steadfast and loyal service. I now have several certificates of appreciation. The Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association wishes to express its gratitude to Alex Dedoyan for outstanding service to the sport of harness racing, as evidenced by your service to this organization. For your many contributions, we wish to offer our congratulations and express our thanks. Alex, are you here? Alex, would you please come up? Alex, would you please come to the front? Sorry to do this to you. Certificate of Appreciation. The Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association wishes to express its gratitude to Kevin Mack for outstanding service to the sport of harness racing, as evidenced by your service to this organization. For your many contributions, we wish to offer our congratulations and express our thanks, awarded March 15, 2015. Finally, Certificate of Appreciation. The Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association wishes to express its gratitude to John Yinger for outstanding service to the sport of harness racing, as evidenced by your service to this organization. For your many contributions, we wish to offer our congratulations and express our thanks, awarded March 15, 2015. Finally, several of our prior directors passed away during 2015, and we would like to acknowledge them at this moment. Whereas William E. Hap Hansen served and defended his country, first as a cadet at the United States Naval Academy and later in both World War II and the Korean War, retiring from the Naval Reserves as a lieutenant commander. Whereas he brought the benefit of his wise counsel to this association for 6 years, as well as serving as Vice President of Harness Tracks of America, their executive and scholarship committees, and a director of HTA Insurance Limited. Whereas his long and robust tenure at Brandywine Raceway helped position the Delaware Valley track as a leader in our sport. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association herewith remembers the enduring dedication and leadership provided to our sport and our association by Mr. Hansen, and offers its deepest condolences to his children, Karen and Kent, grandchildren, Kristen and Derek, and great-grandchildren, Sydney, Ann, and William Hudson, upon his passing, resolved this date, March 15, 2015. Whereas Kermit Hinshaw served our country as an expert teletypist in the Army Signal Corps in General George Patton's 7th Army, and as director of the United States Trotting Association representing District 4A for 12 years. Whereas he was a trainer, driver, and breeder of standardbreds for 6 decades at Hinshaw Homestead Farms in Richland, Iowa. Whereas he trained and drove Jodvin, the 1976 juvenile trotting colt champion, and drove the colt himself in the 1977 Hambletonian. Whereas he founded and led the Hawkeye Colt Association for nearly 2 decades, and also served as president of the Iowa Harness Horse Association. Whereas his lifetime of dedicated horsemanship and selfless leadership was recognized with induction to the Iowa Harness Racing Hall of Fame in 1995. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association herewith remembers the enduring dedication and leadership provided to our sport and our association by Mr. Hinshaw, and offers its deepest condolences to his children, John, Emily, Corwin, and Sally, his 7 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren upon his passing. Resolved this date, March 15th, 2015. Whereas Arthur Johnson served his country with the United States Navy before turning his attention to racing of every kind. Whereas he worked his way up from ground superintendent to president or general manager at 5 different tracks, including Pocono Downs, where he guided them with a steady hand through troubled years of reorganization and growth. Whereas he served on the board of the United States Trotting Association representing District 7, whereas he was well known for his open and welcoming demeanor and lived his life by the simple credo, always be fair. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association herewith remembers the enduring dedication and leadership provided to our sport and our association by Mr. Johnson, and offers its deepest condolences to his children, Roy, Tom, and Shauna, his 7 grandchildren and 10 grandchildren upon his passing. Whereas Corwin Keith Nixon served as director of the United States Trotting Association representing District 1 for 6 years in his capacity as president of Miami Valley Trotting, whereas he was active in harness racing for his entire life and also served as general manager of Lebanon Raceway and president of the Trotting publication, whereas he had a robust and generous life of community service, including affiliations with 4-H Shriners, the Masonic Lodge, J.C.'s, Turtle Creek Township, and served on the Warren County Fair Board and as director of their speed program. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the United States Trotting Association herewith remembers the enduring dedication and leadership provided to our sport and our association by Mr. Nixon, and offers its deepest condolences to his wife, Lornea, his children, Corwin and Melissa, sister Karen, and 7 grandchildren upon his passing. Resolved this date, March 15th, 2015. And as a last, and not and as a last, passing away yesterday, Jim Doherty, at the age of 74, as probably all of you know, a great driver and trainer, member of the Living Hall of Fame. We acknowledge his death yesterday, and our words and comfort to his family. And for all of the individuals I mentioned, could we please have a moment of silence? Okay. Thank you all very much. I have new notes for this next one. So next on our agenda is the election of officers, but in advance of that, as all of you know, we have 2 candidates for the position of president this year. President Langley submitted his information, and Jason Settlemoir submitted his. I will outline the process that we're going to go through for the next 20-25 minutes. And this process will include each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to speak on their vision as to why you should vote for them. After that, 2 minutes for each, we will take questions from the directors. And if you're going to ask a question, again, I would ask that you come in front of the microphone. You will ask a question of one of the directors, they will answer it, and the other director will also have an opportunity to respond to that question as well. We will do that. They will each have 90 seconds to respond to your question. There will not be any follow-up. We will move on to the next question, assuming that there are questions from the directors. We will continue this for approximately 15 minutes. At that time, if time allows itself, I will take questions from the rest of the people in this room, members of the United States Trotting Association. Once that is complete, we will then have a vote by written ballot. The ballots will be distributed to you, to the directors, the 51 directors, by Ben Kenny and Don Marine. They will be the official counters of those ballots as well, and being assisted by Barbara Brooks. Sam Beagle will also be a representative to oversee the count once those ballots are collected. At the end of that, we will have a result which I will announce to the directors. Hopefully you all follow that. Mr. Settlemoir, would you come up to the front, please?
What do you want to do with the non-contested office?
We'll do that after.
Okay.
As Mr. Settlemoir is the challenger, he has provided the initial time to provide his thoughts to the directors. And we have, what did I say? 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. First and foremost, I want to say that I both respect and appreciate President Langley's efforts, not only as a USTA director and the USTA president, but his tireless work on behalf of the sport. What he's been dealing with has been no easy task. This year, I decided to run for president to bring a fresh new perspective and view to the USTA. I believe that change is necessary to move our sport forward. One of my favorite quotes comes from President John F. Kennedy. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. Over the past dozen years, 3 important indicators of what I consider a healthy industry have shown a sharp decline. USTA membership is down 30%. The total number of starters per year is down 22%, while the most staggering number, the number of mares bred in North America, is down 49%. I think it's important to note that roughly $6 billion has been raised for in North America from alternative gaming, with little money going to marketing. My initiatives would include, and we must, stop the decline in USTA membership, stop the decline in total number of starters, and stop the decline in total number of mares bred, the most daunting number. Create an interest in harness racing, develop an international fan base, lead in technology and gaming advances, while increasing handle at our racetracks and creating a unified, integrity-driven product.
Please wrap it up.
I believe the USTA is uniquely positioned to lead our sport. Our organization's membership includes every major stakeholder in the industry, and I also believe with proper leadership, focus, and unity, the USTA directors can pave the way to a brighter future. The USTA model should be mandated to facilitate dialogue and foster cooperation among the associations that represent horsemen, women, and racetracks. I'd also like to leave you with this quote from Leo Zhao. If you don't change direction, you may end up where you are heading. May we remember what is going on directly north of our borders in Canada. It's a cautionary tale. I ask for your vote today as I stand willing and ready to serve this membership. Thank you.
Okay. You now can have 3 minutes if you need it. Okay. And I'm going to get strict later.
Well, I ran my campaign, short as it was, based on my record as USTA president and my record in the racing industry. And at times I was discouraged to hear that I wasn't competent to be president of anything other than a registry, and that a few other things that I thought didn't need to come up in a campaign. I think that the last few years, and if you were at the marketing committee yesterday, you saw all the things that our wonderful staff, led by Mike Tanner and his staff, are doing. Everything that Jason has mentioned, we are trying to do, and it seems to be getting done. Not too long ago, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And on that night, a good friend of mine, who was a race secretary, who else is also highly placed in the industry, said, one thing about Langley, he's always 2 years ahead of everybody else, and he's the most optimistic person I've ever seen. And I think that's true. I have great optimism for this business, and I think that we can accomplish a lot of things, especially with new things like social media that we never knew about before, that's made it possible for us to spend the proper amount of money. Now, the big difference, I think, between my feelings and Jason's is that Jeff and Jason have always wanted to get money from the purses at the slots track to promote the business. And they say that none of it's been used. Well, if you look at Yonkers and the horsemen in Yonkers, they've spent a lot of money with TV stations. They've spent a ton of money and have had great results on their efforts in France and in Yonkers, or in Yonkers, in Australia. Pennsylvania has spent a lot of money based on TV programs, and Ohio is coming up with some plans to do great things with the breeding industry and to try to get fans back. Indiana has gotten the Breeders' Crown in 2017, I think it is, Scott, and I know they're going to do a great job of it. The worst part about Indiana getting all that is that because we don't have slots in Illinois, they got a step on us, so I feel bad about that. So basically, I think that we need to keep on the path we're on. I don't say that we shouldn't try to market and everything else, but we've tried marketing plans before. They never seem to work just by spending money. In all my years at the USTA, we've had one marketing plan that worked. And that was 21 or 22 years ago. Joan Solinsky did a great study, and she came up with two ideas. One was, one was slots at the racetracks, and the other was improve our facilities. It's taken 20-some years in most places to get that done, but that is what is saving the industry at the present time. I think I've done a good job. I'm like foiled again. I think I got a few races left in me, and so I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, I have to regain control here. All right, so now you've heard the comments of the two candidates. I will now take questions from the directors, and if you have a question, I would ask that you step to the center and ask that question. Gee, we're going to have a lot more time. Okay. All right. Now I would then take questions from others, non-directors that are in the audience who may have a question of either of the candidates. State your name for the record.
Steve McCoy, Director from District 1. Maybe I'll try to get this kicked off. I note that both of you, your principal involvement in the industry today is through racetrack ownership and operation. The biggest part of the constituency of this association really is breeders, owners, trainers, and drivers. So I would ask you, what assurance do we have that you both will be sensitive to the issues that that part of the constituency of the association has to deal with on a regular basis.
Well, first of all, Steve, I was always criticized by my boss, Billy Johnson, for being a horseman's guy instead of a track guy. And I've owned several horses in the last 12, 15 years. My brother owned horses before that because I couldn't, because I was a racing official. I go over to the barn every morning and look at my 7 horses who are doing very well this year now that the purses are lower in Illinois. I think I'm going to come out just fine except no money. And I understand your concern. The same concern was raised 12 years ago when I first became president, and I don't think there's a person in this room that could say that I treated the horsemen any differently than I did the racetracks.
Thank you. Well, Mr. McCoy, as many of you know, that's where I started out, was on the backstretch with Terry Holton. So I'm very familiar with the backstretch and the inner dealings that go on with that. I've been a member of the Ohio Harness Horsemen's Association since I was 18 years old, continue to be to this day. I feel it's important that we work together, not only from a racetrack management standpoint, but also from a horsemen's organization standpoint. I think that it strengthens us. Unity will strengthen us to be able to move this industry forward. But I stand, as I said, that's where I come from, is the backstretch. I've cleaned some stalls. As some of you know, that's the reason why I got into the announcer's booth at the age of 13, because I didn't want to clean stalls. Terry always wanted to make me a top catch driver, but as some can attest to in this room, including Jerry Knappenberger, that's not what I wanted to do. I was clean stalls. I would have liked to have driven horses, but I didn't want to do the other part. So I wound up in the announcer's booth. I wound up in track management at Scioto Downs, and that's where I cut my teeth under Bob Steele, Jerry Kaub, Stacy Cahill, and many others, and then moved on to New York from there. But I feel it's important for the horsemen and racetracks to work together to strengthen our position inside of the industry. Thank you.
Exactly 90 seconds. Whoa. All right, so now that Steve started the questions, let's see if we have a follow-up question. Any other questions? Okay. There being no other questions, we will move to the process for the election of the president. Mr. Kenny, Mr. Marine, who's got our ballots? As they are distributing the ballots, each of the ballots obviously has the 2 names of President Langley and Mr. Settlemoir. You should check the box of 1 candidate only. If you check 2, it will not count. Once you have checked the box, I would ask you to fold it, and the proctors will recover them from you and bring them back up here. So check the box of the candidate you would like to vote for, fold the ballot, and hold it for Mr. Marine and Mr. Kenny to pick up once that's done.
Are we able to vote up here as well?
Yes, there will be 2. Okay, so there are 48 ballots out there. I have 3, make it 51 for the 3 people here. Yes. Mr. Langley says that in Chicago they do it slightly different. Where are we going to count this? Barbara, right over here. She's going to count them right here. And Mr. Beagle, please come to the front, and then we have these, and then they're going to count with you.
Well, sort them out.
We'll sort them out?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll wait on Sam.
Sam's coming. Sam, would you please oversee Ms. Brooks?
Guys, thank you very much.
Okay. All right, will you come back to order, please? The votes have been cast, the votes have been tabulated, and the results are President Langley 38, Jason Settlemoir 13. President Langley is reelected as President of the United States Trotting Association for the next 4 years. And then it's your turn. Now we have the election of the other officers of the organization. These hopefully will be a little easier as they are uncontested, but we do need your majority vote to elect these individuals. Russell Williams, previously vice chairman, is again up for chairman. I would look for a voice vote for election. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Barbara Brooks, previously secretary, again secretary. I would look for a, again, voice vote. All those in favor of Barbara Brooks for secretary, say aye. Aye. It's carried.
Thank you.
I know. Richard Brandt, previous treasurer, again for treasurer. I look for a voice vote. All those in favor of Mr. Brandt for treasurer, say aye. Aye. Carried. And the last one, if you want someone to run this meeting, is myself for chairman for this year. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Appreciate your efforts, your work, your time in all of this. We did have a question which we were trying to evaluate, because up next, after election of officers, is the president's report. Not quite sure who the president was going to be, and so now I'm sure Mr. Langley has some comments for us for the past year. Certainly. All right. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for your confidence in me. I assure you that we'll try to do our best and try to move this thing forward, try to get the number of mayors spread up, the membership in the USTA. I think that with Ohio and Indiana becoming strong, that we'll see a lot of increase in the number of polls. Unfortunately, Illinois and New Jersey have a little bit of a problem. Michigan has a problem, and we're just going to have to work at those as we go along. I'm going to make my report short, which I know you'll all be glad. I think that the most encouraging thing to me this year has been the work of the staff. Mike Tanner, Dan Leary, T.C. Lane, the entire staff are always looking for things to do. If you want to see how good they are, you should attend a staff meeting, which I've attended maybe 3 or 4 during the year, and hear the dialogue between these people. They have many new ideas. They're always trying to figure out a way for the future. Just some of the things, the online entry system, that T.C. Lane and Sherry did that, and it's just been really well accepted. Dan Leary is doing a good job on his finding handicapping contests, finding a way to get us on some kind of a TV situation, even if it's handheld and over the internet, which would be good and we could afford it. And Mike does a great job of running the office. And now that he's got a nice office to run, I expect him to do even better. So basically, unless somebody has some questions, I'll be turning this over to Mike and let him give you a complete rundown of all the things we're working on. Okay, good, thank you. Mike?
Okay, this is a first for me because this is my 7th annual meeting as Executive Vice President, and every year I write a speech, and every year Phil says everything that I'm going to say. So I underprepared, and the first line was to be, "Good morning, I will be brief," and actually I'm going to hold to that. I want to start by thanking all the directors for being here in Columbus. All of you have taken time out of your lives to be here. None of you are getting paid, and your service is appreciated. I think sometimes that is not said enough. People just don't know all that you do. And I think that's true for those of us in Columbus as well. It's not a perfect analogy. We do get compensated for our efforts. But during my travels, I'm frequently asked just what it is that you guys do. And because it seems like our jobs are never done, I sometimes have to pause before I answer. In the past 12 months, we launched online entry. We funded medication studies and traveled around the nation to advocate separate rules for separate breeds. We introduced and ramped up a social media initiative that expanded quickly and garnered international recognition. We expanded our series of online handicapping contests. We saw strategic wagering get bigger and better. We sold one property and bought another that will save us considerable dollars in taxes and maintenance year over year. And between moving out, between moving into the new building, we were in temporary quarters at the airport that were space challenged to begin with, and Sherry Antion Moore and her IT staff had to move the entire infrastructure literally overnight, and you never noticed the difference. We continued to deliver service, I think, at a near flawless level. I was really proud of that. Out of everything that's happened this year, internally, to take a look at how staff responded to that, and how we never really took our eyes off the ball. That, to me, might have been our biggest accomplishment this year. And so I am greatly appreciative of that. And I see a bunch of people who were responsible for that sitting in the back of the room. So I think I've said it before, but I really do mean it. Thank you very much. Throughout all of this, dues and fees remained unchanged. It's about doing more with less, and I think that's exactly what we've been able to accomplish. So that's been said, need to move on, because obviously there's so much more that needs to be done. At its best, the USTA helps tracks and horsemen's organizations help themselves. And towards that end, the budget that we will present tomorrow includes funding for the continuation of the social media program and a $150,000 line item that would aid industry groups looking to put their races on television. The broadcast committee met Friday night and worked on qualifying criteria for that initiative. In both instances, industry buy-in is needed, both in terms of participation and funding. We're moving pedigrees online as part of Pathway. We're looking to make part of Pathway free. We'll continue to lead the way in publicizing the sport. Our SOS and Full Circle programs will continue to promote the need for responsible horse ownership and aftercare. And speaking of ownership, we'll leverage all of our platforms to make owner recruitment a priority. I could go on. Like I said before, our jobs are never done, and that's a good thing. We're always looking to move the ball forward. We like what we do. We look forward to working with you again over the next 12 months. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Tanner, and thank you, President Langley.
The next item on the agenda is a financial report. Dennis Fisher has, I don't know, how many years have you been here? 28? 28. I mean, you know, the numbers are staggering, and you know, it's an interesting thing to me. You know, you could be a CFO anywhere, and many of the jobs our people could be in many different places. I think one of the attractions is what our industry is. People wanting to be close to it, and we find talented people, and we don't deal very much with turnover, which is a great thing for the organization to have that continuity and people that care about the place that they work at. So I don't focus that on Dennis, but looking at him reminded me of that. So our next item on the agenda is a financial report. Dennis Fisher will provide an overview for you. Again, when we deal with numbers, Dennis does a good job of making it fluid. So Dennis, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm tempted the way the way this meeting is opened up just to ask, does anybody have any questions? And then just sit back down. But since I figured someone would take me up on that. But however, we do have a couple of things that were different. Most everyone is aware that we've sold our buildings, and we bought a new one, we consolidated, and we've had a move, and that seems to happen about every 50 years or so, so I thought it's probably worth going over it a little bit. You should have received your audit packet when you arrived. We did receive a clean opinion, which is the desire when you go into these audits, and I'll just cover a couple of pages and a couple of highlights. And if you have questions, please bring those to the Finance Committee meeting tomorrow. If you want to turn to page 2, which is the balance sheet, I'll highlight a couple lines. Our cash and cash equivalents are up to about $700,000. About a third of the page down, you'll see the property and equipment. And under 2013, our book value of our depreciated buildings and equipment were about $220,000, and now you see with the building that we had purchased and with some of the improvements that were made, our property and equipment shows a net book value of $1.6 million. So you see a big increase then from between the sale and purchase of the new equipment. Our total assets have risen from $7.1 to $9.3 million. On the liability and net asset side, a lot of these numbers look the same. However, as we go down under the pension obligations, and there's a note 6 to this at the back, the footnotes have really become a huge portion of the financial package. There are 11 pages of notes to the financial statements. The note to the pension statement is 6 pages long, but there had been some changes to the Financial Accounting Standards Board and how they present things, but this is the one item that we've had a pension committee studying. We're looking to terminate this plan, but they had come out with new mortality tables, and we've also had a decline in the discount rate that we use to evaluate that liability. And basically, we've had an increase in that liability of almost $1.5 million. And so you see the obligation that we had at the end of December of 2013 of just under $600,000. It is now 2.1. Just to soften that a little bit, that's the change for the financial accounting standards that have made that change for the financial statements. However, the cost to terminate it, and I think anyone who's been involved in our discussions on that, notice that there's a big discrepancy in the cost to terminate it and what our liability is on the books. So while this liability has jumped up, the cost to terminate it has not increased that much. So we're just making those numbers match out a little bit. The last thing is you can tell from the gain on the sale, our net assets between the gain on that sale of $2 million and the reduction because of the pension obligation is increased by 1.5. Our unrestricted net assets have increased by about $700,000. Going on to page 3, we'll see a lot of our revenues, and I won't go over these. They consolidate a lot of these, and if you looked at your budgets, you probably can get a little bit better explanation. But a lot of the areas that we have are down, and again, as our memberships and things are off, that seems to follow the trend. The only area that we have reversed in that is under the data processing area, and we actually see an increase in revenues in that area. So that is, we've had a lot of people talk about our most valuable asset is our data, and we are trying to take advantage of that and use that to fund our operations. I would like to have had the gain on the sale. So you look at the total revenue, it says, oh, good, $10 million this year compared to 8.2 last year, but it does include the gain on the sale of the property of $1.9 million. So if you take that out of there, we're still at a little over $800 million, but we're off just about $150,000 from last year's revenue level. On to the next page for the expenses. Again, there's not a whole lot of changes here, except for, typical of our operations, although they've kind of bounced around a little bit with some of the cost of our move and the rental that we've had of our temporary location. But one change that I do want to notice, and this is again a change because you've not seen it in the past. Our statement last year for 2013, we showed a gain of $75,000 from operations. Now you see that line for 2013, it now shows a loss of $500. And this is, again, some boring stuff. The Financial Accounting Standards Board requires the net periodic cost of pension to be shown in the statement. That's the next to bottom line. For last year, it's just under $700,000. This year, it's $550,000. And we used to record that whole change down below. So this is just kind of goofy accounting stuff that you've got to follow. But I do want to show, again, just to recap, the net increase in net assets it shows for 2014 of $775,000. 3 lines which we used to separate out. We actually had a gain from operations last year of about $333,000. We had a gain on the sale of the property for about $1.9 million, almost $2 million. And then we had the loss or the increase in our liability for pension plan of almost a little over $1.5 million. And those 3 numbers make up that gain. But I challenge the other staff, and they've done a great job in responding. The numbers that we can control from our operations, we've done very good, and we did show that surplus. So with that, if you have questions, bring them tomorrow, and thank you very much.
As it does seem to vary from track to track. In the district meetings, only 2 of the 13 voted to approve, 6 voted no. The race secretaries voted no. There were also 5 districts that voted to table this particular proposal. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the member poll voted to approve. Are there any comments on the proposal to standardize the placement, size, et cetera, of pylons used on the racetrack? This is supposed to be interactive. Kenny?
Well, I would just say in the district meeting, and as you said, the race secretaries meeting, voted against this, and I think it should be left up to the tracks. We're talking about different sizes of tracks, half-mile, 5/8 mile tracks, et cetera. I think in our case, we put our pylons up 30 feet in the turns and 40 feet in the straightaways. And we get into these different sized tracks, I think it could affect that, but I think it should be the decision of the track management as they discuss items such as this with the Horsemen's Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any other comments? Phil?
I'd like to hear from a couple of the drivers. It would seem to me that at 10 feet, it's pretty darn close, and on some tracks you'd have, well, on a mile track at 5,280 feet, every 10 feet, you'd have 528 of these things, and it would look like a picket fence. But Jeff, do you have any comment on it?
You're our go-to driver, Jeff. Jeff Gregory.
In essence, the rule is probably a well-meant rule, but 10 feet apart as it's written is, in my opinion, no way it would get passed. It'd be just like putting the hub rail back up. If there was a problem, the whole idea of the pylons, if there's a problem, is to be able to get your horse to the inside of the track, and you'd never get a horse in between those pylons without jumping 2 or 3 of them. And if it was ever to be passed in a future year, rewritten, I would suggest that it would probably be more like Mr. Marshall said, 30 to 40 feet apart. I'm not sure. I think at Yonkers, where I race primarily, they are 40 feet in the turns and 50 in the stretch, but I could be wrong. And you definitely need room to get your horse to the inside of the track. There's no way 10 feet apart you would ever be able to do it.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other comments?
Bob Yan from District 4. At our meeting back in Wisconsin, I brought up this same thing. When there isn't a scarier time than if you come around a turn. I mean, in Wisconsin, we race at the half-mile county fair tracks. The last thing you want to do is come around a turn and see that the first time around the racetrack, somebody had hit one of these pylons, it bounces out in front of you, and it's sitting crossways in front of you, and not very pleasant things go through your mind is, how am I going to get over that pylon, much less the guy behind me, or if you've got a guy on the outside of you, is he going to let you go out around it? And so if we're going to start putting several hundred of these up, it's more apt to be hitting one of them, kicking it back out into the racetrack, and then try and jump over it the next time. So I am definitely opposed to putting them that close together.
Anybody else? If not, that'll conclude our discussion of number 1. Rule proposal number 2. What you'd say affectionately or not, but it's was brought to the fore by the Tactor Stables 3 entries in the Hambletonian, where Mr. Tactor chose to drive 1 horse and had the other 2. And the proposal is if a driver has a financial interest in more than 1 horse in a race, as an owner or trainer, that driver is prohibited from driving in that race wherein the horses involved are permitted to race uncoupled. So it would eliminate the trainer as one of the possible drivers of the horses in that entry. In the district meetings, 3 voted to approve, 8 voted to deny, the race secretaries voted to deny, and again on the online poll, members voted to approve. Any comments on that proposal? Ray.
Ray Schnicker. I think it's a really stupid rule. personally, it would have cost me probably through the years about 50, 60 grand. And to me, just have the judges do their job. The job is like the Tactor deal when they said he kept the guy locked in. As a gambler, if you're a $2 better doesn't matter because they don't know what the hell they're betting anyways. But a real bettor is going to know there's an entry in the race. Plus, if Tactor would have pulled out to the 5-hole, they'd have been screaming to let the guy out. So to me, it's just judges doing their own thing. And to me, I do all the training. I buy the horses. Now, why am I getting screwed for the 5%?
Kenny.
I agree with Mr. Snichter, but possibly from a different perspective. We already do this in overnight events, you couple horses, overnight events, etc. And there is a rule already in place regarding special events, invitational stake races, etc. And we do have the relief to separate trainer entries and race them as separate interests. I know it doesn't specifically say drivers, but it does say trainers. And the reason for this, obviously, is to get more betting interest in the race. And I think if you're talking about 3 horses and you're going to combine them into one betting interest, it's very possible you might possibly end up with a non-bettable race. And I think the intent of this originally, by allowing us to do this in special events, was to help increase the number of entries, the number of betting interests, to help our betting public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Any other comments?
The rule brings up something interesting that I never was aware of until we went to the World Trotting Conference. And that's in every other country, well, not Canada, they're like us, but in Australia, France, everywhere else, they allow not only trainer entries in a race, they allow up to 4 owner entries in a race, all uncoupled. Now, that's something we need to think about for next year. I know in Illinois we're trying to get at least where you can uncouple a couple of them.
Uncouple a couple?
Yeah, uncouple
okay.
a couple.
Yeah.
You say it fast, it's not so
yes.
bad. But anyway, in Australia they carry it one step farther in that anybody that's got 3 or 4 horses in a race has to tell the judges the day before the race what they're going to do with them, who's going to leave, who's going to trail, who's going to do what. And I got to see that happen in the States. And here's some of the drivers when they're told, well, you said you were going to leave and you didn't. Yeah. I think it could get interesting. But anyway, that is the way the rest of the world operates. And I kind of agree with Ray that, it's not the brightest rule we've ever proposed.
Oh, we've had some good ones. Any other comments? If not, we'll move now to number 4. We've already considered number 3 as one of the racing under saddle rules. This is a try to clarify and perhaps enhance the foot out of stirrup requirement. When it went through the districts, 3 voted to approve, 9 voted to deny. The race secretaries voted to deny, and on the member poll, they voted to approve. Alan, would you like to present number 4, please?
I'm Alan Levitt, District 6. I think that probably the objections came from the penalty, which are not really relevant as far as I'm concerned. My concern was with the 2 rules which are noted at the top of page 28, USTA present rules, that contradict each other. One says you can take your foot out of the stirrup. The other says you can't. And it seemed to me that we should we should not have that contradiction in our rules. As far as the penalties, if you'll notice that with the first one, there's a recommended 9-day suspension for the first offense. I do think we should have one rule on this subject. I'm really not terribly I would like it to say that you can't take your foot out of the stirrup except to pop the earplugs, but whether we do that or whether we don't do that, I think we should have a rule, a single rule, instead of two contradictory rules that we've got right now.
Thank you. Other comment, Russell?
Russell Williams, District 7. As I read it, the second rule says you can take your foot out of the stirrups for the purpose of pulling earplugs. The first rule says if you take your foot out of the stirrups, that in and of itself does not constitute kicking. I think the first rule is looking at the second rule because it was known that drivers sometimes take their foot out of the stirrups to pull the earplugs. For that reason, I think the assertion that these two provisions are totally contradictory goes a little too far. There is, therefore, no administrative reason to make a change. If the board wishes to combine the rules, adjust the penalties and so forth, well and good, but the two provisions are simply not contradictory.
Any other comments? Okay. We're going to move now to number 7, I think. Let me get there. Yes. Number 7 is a proposal to amend Rule 18.12, use of hobbles. And what it really wants to address, as I understand it, is the ability to change from a hobbled status to an unhobbled status either during the same event or to eliminate any requirement for having to requalify a horse if you change that piece of equipment. I think the proposer brings up some interesting points, and when he itemizes the list of changes that can be made in both of those circumstances without those requirements. We can change bridles, bits, overcheck bits, length of hobbles, shoes, Murphy blinds, head poles, ear hoods, eye cups, you name it, can be changed in general without having the same effect. So it's an interesting question to be proposed, and I'd like to hear your comments. Okay, Ray. You did way well. Yeah.
Actually, in Jersey, they've been doing it for years already. It's worked fine. There's never been a problem. I think, it should be in all the states because they've already had, probably at least 10 years of it in Jersey, not one single problem.
Just to clarify, Ray, they've been doing, as the new proposed paragraph states, is what's in effect.
What's that?
I'll try to say it better. What you're saying is that the rule that you just referred to, or what they're doing in Jersey, is reflected in the rule proposal.
Yeah.
That's there. Okay.
Yeah, and they've already had it there.
Yeah. Okay.
Fine.
I had it confused in my head. I don't think I said. In the districts, 5 voted to approve, 6 voted to reject. Race secretaries had an amendment. I got to look it back and see if I can find out what it is.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I think one thing that's important to clarify here, and in New York, one of the fellows that helps us make the rules asked to get this done so we could come up with a rule in New York, like Ray said, that made more sense. Like New Jersey, the first thing that's left out here is you really need to clarify what type of hobbles. And obviously, the rules for this were written when there weren't
For
a lot of
paces.
trotting hobbles being used, and it really should be a rule that you're changing to separate the two out. In New York, if we tried to pass one rule for pacing and trotting hobbles, nothing would happen. So we really should try to focus on coming up with a rule for how we add or don't use trotting hobbles, and it doesn't say it here. Mr. Spadaro wanted to make sure that was clarified, so that if we did anything, it could get some traction.
Kenny, do you remember what the amendment on race secretaries was, or anybody else? Well, I've got it somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it. Aha. It is listed as A5 on my trotting hobble should be noted as an equipment change in the program. Was their comment. Did I see? No, me. No, you're gonna. Ivan. Right, let Sam go. Okay, come on, Sam.
Yeah, Sam Biggle from Pennsylvania. Yeah, what's been happening in Pennsylvania? They go to the fairs, they put the hobbles on, they come back to the raceway, they take them off, and then they go to it's time for a stake race. It didn't work out, so now we're going to put them. A trainer knows what he's doing here most of the time, and I don't think we should be telling them when to put them on. But if you put them on, you got to qualify with them on. And if you want to take them off, you got to qualify with them off. It's a lot of expense. And Ray said earlier, we have these judges. Let the judges, if the judges see something going on they don't like, have them do their job, and it'll take care of this.
Just to be sure we hear the other side, I'm sure the intent is to protect the bettor with
That's
as
what
much
the judge is
information
supposed to be
as
doing.
we can get them, and that's what.
Ivan Axelrod, District 3. My district, the concerns seem to be that this is a significant equipment change, separating it from all the things that Mr. Brandt outlined. I'm not skilled enough to know that. I think protecting the bettor is one of the things. I seem to personally endorse the trainers. That's their job. And all of these changes, they have tried to see if they make the horse improve in all the training that they do. So personally, I see it as a natural extension of that. And the judges are there to watch, and if they want to see something, they want them to qualify, they certainly can have them qualify. So I personally lean there, but that was the concern of our district, is just providing more protection because that's such a significant change, a gate change.
Sorry, I can't write and talk at the same time. Anything else on number 7? Kenny.
I agree with what has been said, but again, I think there should be some concern about the betting public and how they're being served in this. From one standpoint, the bane of our sport has been breaking horses. And the thing that's most related to breaking horses is probably hobbles. So that is a major change. I'm reading something here that I don't agree with, and again, getting back to protecting the public, but it says as long as changes are duly noted and listed prior to the race card, the betting public is properly protected. I disagree with that because if a horse changes, puts the hobbles on or takes the hobbles off without qualifying, that public does not have a line of which he can make a value judgment on. He's going to have to guess. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anything else?
Like I stated before, in Jersey, they already have the rule. And I kind of look at the handle at the Meadowlands. They bet more than everybody else probably by 5 to 10 times as much. It doesn't seem like them big gamblers in Jersey have any problem with the switch. It's been going on there for 10 years. So.
Well, I think we've beat this one to death. Well, not to death. Not to death. Effectively. Thank you. Thank you. We have just, yes, that's a much better way to say it. I move that the previous statements be deleted. All right, we're at number 9, and it's been proposed by our registration chair, Dr. Walker, and Vice Chair Dr. Mossbarger, and our registrar TC, and it states, effective with falls of 2016, registration papers will not be issued until the foal is permanently identified and confirmation of parentage verification is received from the testing facility approved by this association. 11 districts said yes, 2 said no. The race secretaries and the membership said yes. Doc, Johnny, anybody want to make any comments?
Ken Walker. The only comment I'd like to say, our dear deceased friend Bob Huffwood is looking down at us and saying, thank God you finally got around to that. This is a rule that he proposed many times, and it's one that really should have been in effect. And with the technology we have now, I think it is well advised to pass it. My one concern about it is the identifiers that have to go long distances, and that is a small number nowadays, and I think it can be worked out where if they're working on a per foal basis that they can be helped with the mileage. I think we can work it out with staff and get that accomplished. But I think the rule really should be there. Jerry Hawes is very much in favor of it.
Are there any negative comments regarding proposal number 9? All right. Number 10 is a bylaw change, and will be handled separately when it comes to voting. It is, in my view, merely a simplification of the fees that we charge fares for their license and the services that we provide. It is a minimal change. Most fares benefit from it rather than pay more, but it just simplifies it considerably. 11 districts favored its approval, 1 opposed, 1 voted to table. It was approved by race secretaries and the member pool. Any comments on number 10? Mr. Hubler. Said I called him Mr.
Skip Hubler, District 1, Chairman of the Fair Committee. Just so everybody knows, the Fair Committee voted unanimously that this is a good rule. We don't have to spend much time on it.
Keeping with the theme of the day, are there any other questions? If none, that concludes my report. We'll gather all the stuff I brought, just in case.
Thank you, Mr. Brandt. It's a lot of energy to go through those rules. I appreciate the time and certainly the effort in doing that. We have 1 hour before we need to adjourn to the picture, group picture. We have 3 speakers in this next hour, so we have 60 minutes, and it's kind of a drop-dead date time. Rob Key, Ed Martin, and Jay Hickey will be speaking in that hour. I do need to control that time, so it's 15 to 20 minutes per person, and we'll have to stick to that in order for us to meet the agenda and the next things that we have to do. So we will move forward with Rob Key. For those that were here yesterday in the marketing committee, you heard Rob speak quite a bit. For those of you who have not met Rob previously, he's founder and CEO of Conversion, the leading international social media consultancy headquartered in New York, founded in 2001. They have helped leading brands including IBM, Hilton Hotels, Yahoo, Twitter, the USTA leverage the power of social media for competitive advantage. Among its many recognitions, Conversion was awarded the 2012 Sammy Award for Best Social Agency. I'm not going to go on and on. We've met Rob now for, I don't know, it seems like forever. And he made a detailed presentation yesterday. Many of you were there. We have talked. He's going to try and modify that a little bit and focus on some key points that were in his presentation yesterday. And so we'll move forward. And one thing before, because Rob may mention this, hopefully, that the USTA received at the World Trotting Conference an award for social media. And this is it. So it's pretty rocky because it's two pieces, but a pretty impressive thing for the USTA and what we're doing. So I'm going to take it, though, move it over here, but I wanted to acknowledge the USTA receiving this award, and now I will turn the presentation over to Rob.
Great. All right, thanks everyone. It's nice to be here. Nice to see so many familiar faces from a year ago. I'm going to make this somewhat as painless as possible because a lot of people sat in a 2.5-hour meeting yesterday on marketing. And I'd say in many ways, it was 2.5 hours of substance. So I think that that's actually some kudos to the USTA for all the things that are happening that are pretty transformative. The only thing I simply want to say is that this is kind of a map of this. We're on a journey, you know, and this isn't just about getting tweets and getting other things. I think Representative Beakey actually could have done my speech for me earlier today, and I could have kind of stopped right there. But we're actually on the journey about the transformation of the sport in the world of social and digital technologies. The product of the sport increasingly is going to be consumed in a digital world through iPhones and iPads and others, and people are connecting through these new social technologies. The question is, how do we harness that for our benefit? And that's the journey that we're on. And I have to say, we're 1 year into this, and we have some great results. But this is a multi-year journey, and we should not take this. We should recognize that it's going to take hard work, and we've got to buckle down and continue through this to the very end. In 2014, what we had to do was to build the. If you have a car and you're going into a race, you have to have an engine, and we built the engine essentially in 2014. So we built a lot of properties, digital properties that some of you have seen, the Ambassador Program and the Harness Racing Fan Zone, which actually won the award at the World Trotting Conference. We reached 18 million people through these social efforts. And we have 1,800 ambassadors, and so we have a nice foundation. The question as we go into 2015 is where are we going to drive the car and how fast are we going to go? So in 2015, we're going to do more things in terms of trying to target owners because we now have these digital assets. We can start to point them in certain directions. It's also going to take some additional funds to be able to start to target some owners in different ways, and I'll kind of run through that quickly. One thing that I want to say is I think a lot of you know how invested I am personally in the sport. From my family and personally, I've mucked a lot of stalls. I had the chance to work a little bit with Billy Houghton. When Jimmy Takter had his first horses, I worked for him. I lived in his house. With Nancy, was just this big. And my life has come full circle here a little bit. As we mentioned, we work with Twitter and Yahoo and others. But my personal investment has been significant. So last year when we actually started this initiative, what the plan was for the USTA, but in addition to multiple tracks, to get together to seed funding. And the budget we were looking to do was $750,000. Now that money includes things like buying media, right? Facebook and Google and others need to make some money, and so that was the number we were trying to get to. At the end of the day, the USTA is the one who stepped up to the table at the $250,000 level. So we had a deficit. Conversion, my agency, invested $459,000 in services and fees into this. And the Finance Committee has the background and would be happy to share more of the detail in terms of what that is. That's not sustainable. As I said yesterday in yesterday's meeting, I cannot care about the future of the sport more than the people in this room or from the people who make their living in the sport every day. And we're investing into the future of the sport, and we're going to have to kind of step up a little bit as an industry to be able to get to the next level. I won't go through this in detail. If people, for those of you who were in this meeting yesterday, we have tons of data. What we're actually, there's a thing called the marketing funnel that some of you are familiar with, where it's essentially awareness, interest, desire, action, right? You got to get people interested. You got to feed the top of the funnel, and as you get through, you get people to become bettors and owners and other things. They need to have a good experience along the way. Well, we filled the top of that funnel with 18 million impressions, and we need to do, now we're looking to do some things to try to do some things on the conversion side of things, convert them into owners, convert them into bettors, and there are things that we can do there. There's a lot of efforts around customer relationship management. Basically, every person that we touch in this sport, every potential fan, we should be capturing their information, their name and email address, so we can remarket to them. This is what brands do. This is what companies do, so we can actually manage our fans and drive additional revenue. I can go through more detail of this with you all at any time. So in 2015, we now have this foundation. We have the engine. We're driving the car. We want to kind of go in 4 different directions. One is, I think something that's really important that was brought up yesterday is this concept of over-the-top strategies. I think for too long as a sport, we've outsourced the distribution of our product to third parties, sometimes to our own detriment. What we have now are technologies where we can actually go direct to the consumer. We call it, and actually in broadcasting, they call it over the top. HBO is a client of ours. Some of you may have read, they just did a deal with Apple TV, so they're bypassing cable, and they're delivering their programming directly through the internet to consumers. We have the ability to do the same thing. Think about the NFL Network. It's the baby steps of creating our own media channels, because frankly, the media doesn't care about us. We have to become the media, and we're heading in that direction. Also, by the way, instead of having to pay some of the networks for distribution that we've had in the past, we have the ability to monetize our own assets. Now, how great is that, instead of having to pay time for airtime, that we potentially can get subscription revenue? So that's one area. The second area is sponsorship. Because we now have data, which this sport has never really had before, when you're trying to sell sponsorships for the sport, poor Sam McKee last year had to say, well, who's your audience? Well, it's kind of like that NASCAR crowd, because you didn't know. We actually now know how big the audience is, who the folks are, what their interests are, what their demographics are. That can be packaged up to be able to talk to larger sponsors. We need to speak that language if we're going to talk to those sponsors, because that's how they think, right? So there's value that can potentially be packaged there. So we're hoping to work with the Hamiltonian Society and the other tracks to be able to do that as well. The third piece is owner acquisition. The one thing I simply want to say here is that we know that there's a lot of opportunity and some of the great things about benefits for horse ownership. The challenge of that is, how do we make it easier for folks to become owners? We did a market research study, which some saw in detail the other day, which basically asked, if you were able to buy a horse buy into a horse or a percentage of a horse for $1,000 with no incremental costs, would you do it? 75% came back and said, yes, I would absolutely do that. So the question, this concept of fractional ownership, I think is quite powerful. And while it's not the only way we want to get owners into the sport, if we can make buying into horses as easy as buying into a mutual fund, how powerful could that be? Because if I own 0.02% of a horse, I still own that horse. And I will still share that on Facebook, and I will share that on Twitter, and I will tell my friends, and there'll be powerful word of mouth. I think there's a lot there, and I think you're going to see more about this. I know the USTA is working some things around that. And then at the end of at the other pieces, we need to work more deeply with tracks. So people will say, "Wow, you're putting all these 18 million folks like on the top of the funnel, but what's it turning into? How many people are showing up at the track? How many people are betting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?" The bottom line is we don't have the tracking to be able to do that. We don't know how many people have become owners yet. We don't know how many people, for example, have actually gone and betted in ADW, because we don't have the data. What we can do, working with the tracks this year, is we have of the people that we're reaching, we can start to do consumer offers. So like, for example, here's like an online coupon, redeem it at the track for a betting voucher or for a free drink or whatever it might happen to be. When they go to the track, they show the little QR code, bang, that person came from offline, we drove them online. We need to start to doing consumer offers. That's an area where we can start to make that final link, that final connection. Because one thing I want to recognize, some people say, well, you know, the product is really bad. How can you market a bad product? Well, the truth is, in this world of digital, which is the way that people are going to consume our sport, frankly, a lot of people may not go to the racetrack, but they're going to be looking at their iPhone, and they do fantasy leagues, and they connect, and they bet online. That's where they live, right? In that world, the experience of the product is the product. The way I consume it on my iPad is the sport. That's what I see. So we can't make up for all the blemishes, potentially, at some particular racetrack on the on-track experience. But we can make it look first-rate and as good as the other sports in the digital world. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to push people to tracks. We should, but this is what we need to own, and this is where we need to focus. I would simply also say there are a lot of things that need to be improved in terms of takeouts and short fields and all the other things, right? But it's, you know, they sometimes say we need to be able to walk and talk at the same time. Let's package what we have. Let's get it out there. Let's market it. And by the way, all these people who are talking about what we're doing in social media, it's the world's biggest focus group. They're telling us what they want or what they don't want. Let's listen to them and start to make some product improvements based on what they're doing. So I hope there'll be a concurrent effort in terms of focusing on some of those specific product issues. So let's talk about targeting. There are, one thing I would simply say, I've also heard some people say, well, the social media thing is for kids. It's not. There are 1.2 billion people on Facebook right now. 50% of people 55 plus have a Facebook profile. This cuts across all demographics. So when we look at, this is Facebook data here specifically, what we've been able to size the market is simply saying that there are approximately 80 to 90,000 people in the US and Canada who've expressed being kind of a fan of harness racing, right? The harness racing fan zone already has 30,000 of them engaged in the first year within it, right? So we still have a market there. But the question is, and this is where we decide how far and how fast will we drive, if the people who describe themselves as horse fans is 4.5 million, right? So we're a small subset of the 4.5 million we can go after. And then if you talk about people who just say they're in fantasy sports, et cetera, we're talking about 8 million. So we want to start to go more directly. Some people have said, well, we're just talking to ourselves. Well, we know we need to energize our base, and we kind of aggregated some of that stuff together this year. But we need to start to go after these affinity groups more aggressively. Now, we did for the Hamiltonian this year. We looked for all the people for California Chrome and said, oh, you know, if you're disappointed about the end of one Triple Crown, here's a new one starting called the Hamiltonian. So we can do that level of precise targeting in social media, and that's why social media is so powerful. We can be precise in who we reach. So it's not just 18 million random people. It's 18 million people who have an affinity interest in this particular sport. The one thing I wanted to show, this is just from the fan zone, and I know this is a lot of data, but I just wanted to show you, on the top are different age groups. You can see 52% of the people who visited the fan zone this year were women, 48% men. But look at the age and the demographics across that. It's pretty broadly spread. In fact, almost 50% are 45 and older. And if you look at this is the income of the folks who are there. We actually have 5% who are making over 500,000, and you can see, like on the lower end, we tend to. This is kind of like lower income. So so you can understand, you know, we're representing and we're reaching the folks that we need to reach. I simply want to say what we have to do here is make it as easy as possible to become an owner. As easy as possible to kind of, even if you're not ready for pari-mutuel betting, there was some talk about fantasy leagues, and there's some issues about that. I get it. But, you know, the fantasy leagues is a multi-billion-dollar business, which is an ability for us to tap into potential new fans. So there's some interesting discussions that we need to look at over there. This is a global issue. I have to tell you, I was in Australia, and I was actually blown away by the enthusiasm of the various countries in terms of working together on a social media basis to help build the harness racing brand globally. What you see here, these are the online conversations about harness racing per country. And the United States leads it, but you can see it's a global conversation. On the right is how positive that conversation is. So there's a recognition that in the world of digital, distance doesn't matter. You can have as much influence on Twitter if you're in New Zealand as you happen to be in New Jersey. So I believe that we're going to see some great cooperation in terms of making this happen and working together for the global brand. And it was really good to see that they're looking for our leadership on that particular matter. Because realize that there's a lot of differences in this room and among the tracks and others in terms of, but one thing we have to realize is we're focusing on building the brand of harness racing, that it benefits everybody who's selling harness racing at the retail level, which are the tracks. And we need new owners. We're having a shortage of horses that's upcoming. We need new owners. We need new breeders, and this is the way to move in that direction. So a few things in terms of what we need for success. We really need everyone to get involved. This was never supposed to be a USTA-centered thing. Kudos to the USTA for stepping up to the table. But we now need horseman groups, we need tracks, and we need each individuals to step up to the table and also participate. You have to have a willingness to, some of this is going to work and some of this isn't. But in physics, they often say, it's very difficult to go from inertia to movement. There is friction when that happens, and friction isn't bad because it means things are happening. But when you're in movement, it's easier to make adjustments based on what the data is telling us, and this is when we're continually getting data to see what works and what doesn't work. So we're going to continue that approach of testing some things, testing other things, finding what works, and then growing it from there. We need more industry alignment. We talk about more money. Frankly, there's a lot of money being spent, but there's being spent in different directions. I hope we can work together to kind of hone our goals and purpose, and we can just make more with what we have, in addition for looking for some more. I often say, people of goodwill may disagree, and I think that's fine. There's a lot of people with different opinions. I just think it's important, if we're going to disagree, let's make sure that it's based on the facts on the ground. And I'm going to do the best I can to be able to get you the facts so we can make decisions. Anybody who ever has any questions or is looking for it, my phone number is at the end of this deck. You guys know how to reach me. My door is open. Let's talk. We need to do more tracking so we can actually start to answer that question that people are going to have. Well, what's the handle? What's this? Is that? But recognize turning the tide of the negative trending that we've seen over time is going to take a long time, 3 to 5 years, to start turning this around and building it back up. But we can do it. And simply, let's communicate and embrace the change that's happening. And frankly, at the end, it's important is now that we're on this journey, we need to see it to the conclusion. The NHL has said that its greatest growth is coming through digital and social media. Other sports, ranging from the PGA and others, are embracing this exact transformation that we're going through. The PGA, for example, did a study recently and found that only 20% of their fan base was under 34, and it scared the heck out of them. What they ended up doing is starting a big video streaming strategy, just like we talked about a little bit the other day, and a social strategy. We did a market research study. Our number is 10%. The PGA was at the lowest of the major sports. We're at 10%. That means only if I brought 100 people through the door right now, only 10 of them would be 34 and under. We cannot miss this next generation. We need to connect with them through the social technologies as the way they communicate, and that's what we're doing. Not to say we're also going to go after the more affluent audiences too, and the folks with discretionary income. So thank you very much. I had a video, but keeping it under 15 minutes, I better leave it right there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. We'll take a couple of questions before we move on to the next speaker. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask today. Bob Galterio, New York.
Yeah, just two quick questions. One, is a hard copy of your deck available, or can you email it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the one from yesterday too, which has a lot more detailed information, is absolutely available.
Okay. And secondly, the slide that showed the sentiment, there were 183,000 impressions, and 8% were positive, 92% were negative. Is that?
I don't think that was the. I don't know. I have to go back and take a look at the data. No. The net sentiment scores are essentially what you do is you take the people who are saying positive stuff versus the people who are saying negative, and then in whatever's positive. So it's on the plus side, it means there are more people saying positive things about you than negative things. So I can show you the actual sentiment scores because I don't know if everybody knows this. We actually capture in real time all the global conversations that people are having, and we put it through sentiment analysis engines. It's the same technology, by the way, we put into IBM. IBM uses our technology to do that. And so we can tell you precisely how people are feeling about the sport and what topic it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can give you more breakout around that. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Rob. And I would just make one point on this. You know, it took us a long time to get here where we're talking about all of the downturn and the loss of fans and all these things. And it isn't going to be corrected in 2 years. It's, you know, using the term journey, it is, and moving in the right direction. And I think in this first year and a half, we've learned a lot about ourselves. And I do a lot of work in the entertainment business, and content is king. You own something, you know, that's where the money is made. And we have lost some things with ADWs, and so it's taking what we own and being the master of that distribution of it, and you make a lot more money. So I think that's part of the strategies here, and I look forward to being part of it. Thanks again. Phil?
I'd just like to say that I know that most of the track operators have been through this, and every time we hire somebody for marketing or something, it takes us the first half a year for them to learn the difference between a trotter and a pacer, and the key word they always use is the horses run. And it's just been a pleasure having Rob on hand, who has an extensive background in harness racing, and you don't have to go through all those stages. And so I think that it really has worked in our favor. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, Ed Martin. Most of us know Ed. For the past 18 years, Ed has been a leading figure in the regulation of horse racing in the United States. Now Ed is in his 10th year as president and CEO of the Association of Racing Commissioners, ORSI. He also was instrumental in formalizing the medication advisory panel with horsemen and track representatives, enacting rules to expand wagering on horse racing to New York bars, restaurants, and mediating horseman track disputes. As president of RCI, Ed is credited with reuniting of North American racing regulators into one unified group and working to expand the professionalism of the association through greater involvement of regulatory attorneys, lab directors, regulatory veterinarians, etc. During Martin's tenure, RCI has advanced uniform standards for totalizator systems, wagering security, drug testing laboratories, and national medication policy. He's done most everything, and he's going to share some thoughts with us today. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you, Ivan. It's a pleasure to be back. When Phil first asked me to come, I said, "What do you want me to talk about?" He says, "Talk about whatever you want to talk about." He says, "There's a lot of stuff going on, and I got to tell the members what's going on." I'm not sure I know how to do this. You got a PowerPoint for me? It's this one? Oh, there we go. RCI, it's the only umbrella organization of official rulemaking entities dealing with the totality of all professional horse and greyhound racing. We set standards for a number of different things. We are the only independent entities recognized to, our members are, to license, enforce, and adjudicate matters pertaining to racing. I want to give you a quick update today on 5 topics, and I'll go fast because Ivan's put a time limit on it. RCI and RMTC, cobalt, compounded substances, federal legislation, and a proposal for USTA and RCI to hook up. The RMTC, there's been a lot of controversy about the RMTC. The RCI remains a member of the RMTC. We rely on the RMTC's lab accreditation process, and we plan to work to improve that process in a number of areas. We also will consider policy recommendations from the RMTC as we would from any group. There's an important difference that is sometimes lost. The RMTC makes recommendations. They do not make rules. They are a consortium of industry special interest groups and a consensus builder. And regulators are created by statute to be independent, publicly accountable, and empowered to make and enforce the rules. For 80 years, the regulators have organized themselves in the RCI, which used to be the Association of State Racing Commissions. Recent developments. The USTA withdrew from the RMTC, and that lessens the ability of regulators to rely exclusively upon RMTC recommendations. There are also some major industry organizations that have questioned the RMTC process and some of their recommendations, and that's created a loss of confidence in some quarters. The RMTC scientific review process lacks participation of some key experts, and a number of our members have expressed concerns about that options are not being presented. I'm probably not saying anything new to you here, but at the end of the day, the regulators have got to make the rules, and the regulators have got to consider the issues. And if those people who have to live by those rules and have to run their horses and operate in this industry do not have confidence in the policies that are coming forward, that causes us to kind of take pause and take another look at how we're doing stuff. So what we've done is we've formed our own scientific advisory group. It's to reorganize some of the existing expertise, independently assess the research and published literature. And our basic question is, what does the science say and what does the science not say? The group is obviously still in formation. Our top tier experts so far is the core working group, Dr. Rick Sams. None of these names are new to you. Dr. Scott Stanley, Dr. George Malin, Dr. Tom Tobin, Dr. Mary Robinson, Dr. Ken McKeever. We envision a second tier of existing experts and advisors to the various commissions in the industry, modeled after the Partnership for Clean Competition model. We intend to have a greater focus on emerging threats. And we've had a number of people in recent times say, you know, that's really what we've got to collectively be focusing on. The way we formulate policy in the association, the science group will assess the science, the toxicology, and the pharmacology. We have a group of veterinarians, our regulatory vet committee. They advise on equine welfare and provide input on pharmacology. And we have a drug testing standards and practices committee, which considers both and develops a proposed policy. Public input is essential, so it's important to participate in the model rule process and meetings. We consider submissions from organizations, the USTA, the RMTC, the National HPPA, the Jockey Club, and you name it, individuals. You can also make suggestions to us, and they will be considered. We have a meeting in Tampa. Everybody is invited. April 21st to 23rd. It's at the Grand Hyatt. The information's on our website. We're also working on developing an online comment section. It's not up yet, but you will see as we consider future modifications to the model regulatory policy, it'll be easy to provide input to that. Hot topic of the day, cobalt. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about cobalt, what to do, what not to do. Here's my prediction. I anticipate that when we meet in Tampa, RCI will come forward with a policy on how to handle cobalt across the system. You've got different commissions going in different directions. We're looking to understand what is known and what is not known. I can't even, we'd like to have a uniform policy on how to handle cobalt. Cobalt is natural in the environment. It's in vitamin B12. It's in your bits. Its presence is not necessarily indicative of an attempt to cheat, but the approach that we're looking at is to prohibit cobalt administrations if you don't have permission of the commission. North American equines really don't have cobalt deficiency, but if you have a legitimate medical reason to basically provide cobalt to your horse, then you've got to go get permission for it. There is a perception, and I'm not going to say a reality because the science is a little bit inconclusive here, that it can affect performance at certain levels. We're trying to understand that. So what we're probably going to do is draw a couple of lines. Elevated cobalt findings absent permission will result in a horse being placed on a vet's list until the level subsides, and fines or suspensions for extremely high levels may be imposed. Studies are out there. This is the study that they did that's based on Dr. Wan in Hong Kong. It seems to be the urinary threshold is 75 nanograms per milliliters. There's a study the RMTC funded. They've not really adopted it yet, but they're talking about 25. You funded a study by Dr. Malin and McKeever and Malinowski. I think they're looking what their number is 70, I believe. You know, in Australia, you're at 200, and other parts of the world, you're at 100. We think it's important to provide some degree of certainty for everybody, and we could spend a fortune over the next 10 years trying to understand this, but I don't think we need to necessarily do that. I think we need to understand it, but I think we need to provide some certainty on it relatively soon, because people just need to know. RCI advanced a model rule on compounded substances. Now we've got an issue that our investigators are finding. There is a reliance in some quarters on, and this came up with primarily it came out of quarter horse racing in the Southwest, but we're seeing it in other parts of the country, dealing with the misuse of compounded substances. I kind of think of the envision of a mad scientist whipping something up in the garage and saying, "Here, use this." What we're coming forward with is a model rule that basically takes some of the other legal requirements governing compounded substances and adopting them as racing regulations to give the commissions the ability to basically deal with this. The possession of a used drug, a substance, or medication on grounds that's not been approved by the appropriate federal agency for use, human or animal, is forbidden without prior permission of the commission or its designee. It's a violation of the regulation to use or distribute a compounded medication if there is an FDA-approved equivalent of that substance available for purchase. A difference in available formulation does not alleviate the need to use FDA-approved products. We're not outlawing these things. We're just mirroring other requirements that are already on the books. It's a violation to possess, use, or distribute a compounded medication on association grounds made from bulk substances if an FDA-approved equivalent is available for purchase. That obviously depends on the jurisdiction and what the state pharmacy board in that state requires. No person excluding licensed veterinarians shall have a drug, medication, chemical, foreign substance, or other substance that is prohibited in a horse on a race day unless the product is labeled in accord with the labeling requirements. The big thing with the labeling requirements is it's horse specific. We're finding we're picking up substances on the backstretch, and you know, these are prescription medications. They're supposed to be for a specific patient. And again, these are not requirements of a racing commission. These are requirements of state vet boards and state pharmacology boards. And what you're seeing is the commissions, in an attempt to strengthen what we do to police this sport, the illegal use of drugs and substances. We're not talking about shutting down any legitimate treatment for a medical purpose. You know, compounded substances are allowed in certain circumstances. It's a matter of veterinary medicine. But we are looking to basically take some of the requirements that exist elsewhere and to help tighten it up a bit, because we are seeing these things abused. We've seen, you know, and it's almost scary, especially if you own a horse and you get at some of these compounded substances. The consistency of it, for instance, clenbuterol. We've had a lot of clenbuterol, compounded clenbuterol problems in quarter horse racing. And what's happened is a lot of people, because it's cheaper to go with the compound than it is Venepolin syrup, and they think they're giving a dose that's going to be safe. But what's happened with the compounded substances, the consistency is not good, and they end up getting positives because they went with the stuff that you couldn't have the quality assurance. And that's one of the reasons why we feel we need for everybody to move forward and mirror some of these other requirements that are on the books. So you will see that initiative moving forward in a number of different jurisdictions. It's that time of year again, and I don't know how much time I got, Ivan, but I'm just going to keep rolling. Musical chairs, the campaign for federal intervention, past attempts. We anticipate we're going to get a bill at some point soon. We had the Whitfield bill. They were going to put racing medication policy in the hands of the Federal Trade Commission, a bureaucracy with not one veterinarian on staff. Then there was the Udall-Pitts bill to put it in the hands of the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, again, an entity with not one veterinarian on staff. We anticipate a 2015 bill, which is going to involve the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. The details are unclear. Although the focus is on thoroughbred racing, the legislation, if it were ever to get to home plate, would affect everybody. Here's what you need to know about U.S. racing, WADA, and USADA testing. In 2013, U.S. state racing commissions tested about 347,000 biological samples. It's 37 times greater than USADA's testing of about 9,200 samples. The worldwide WADA effort tested fewer samples than we tested here in the United States. They tested about 294,000 samples. The results are almost the same across USADA, WADA, and racing testing. 99.55% of USADA samples are clean, 99.66% of racing samples are clean. WADA worldwide had 98.8% clean. Now, when I say clean, I don't mean that there's not something in it. There's just not something in it that we know about. So they have the same problem that we have. And our problem is no bigger or less than the problem of any other sport. Now, here's the question that you hear a lot about. Are they able to find things that we can't? The answer is no. You look at USADA's 2013 annual report, they detected 16 different substances. Racing Commission labs that year detected 74 different substances. Of the substances detected in 2013 by USADA, the capacity to detect the same substances and confirm it exists in the network of racing regulatory laboratories. So anybody says to you, hey, they caught Lance Armstrong and they can catch stuff that you can't catch, that's not true. First of all, they didn't catch Lance Armstrong in the lab. There's a philosophical difference between human sport and equine sport. Therapeutic medications in training is not permitted in human sport. There's a workaround. Athletes can request a therapeutic use exemption to train and compete under the influence of an otherwise prohibited medication. In equine sport, oh, by the way, that's the reason why they have the big emphasis on out-of-competition testing, because they're basically policing everything that an athlete gets in training. The interesting thing with the therapeutic use exception is if they give you one, you can not only train on a substance, you can compete on the substance. Now, we don't allow any of that. They have you look at the USADA annual report about the different categories of substances that they allow their athletes to actually compete on. They have narcotics, stimulants, hormones, all things that we don't allow in competition. In equine sport, we have a long-standing policy position affecting horses in training, that it would be cruel to the horse to deny a needed medical treatment to a horse in training as long as the effects of that treatment cannot affect performance in competition or diminish the ability of a regulatory veterinarian to conduct an adequate pre-race exam. It's a big difference. Next topic and final topic. I'm doing good? Okay. So I'm trying to talk fast. Got to squeeze it all in. USTA and RCI, a joint effort. We have a new model rule that requires the registration of all race horses with RCI. The goal is to facilitate the regulatory function, centralized data, use technology to link information currently submitted. We're not looking to duplicate or replace things that have already been built. We're looking for ways that we can share data so that it would help our members adapt to the technology. The breed registries are light years ahead of where we are at, and we'd like to just partner with you on some of these things. The USTA has a complete database of horses. You collect ruling information. You also have data for other functions appropriate for breed membership and membership administration. RCI, we have a complete database of licensees. We're a repository of commission ruling information. And for some jurisdictions, RCI actually provides all data services for the licensing function. We recently put an RFP out, and to the 3 breed registries. We sent one to Mike for USTA, and we're basically looking how to utilize existing systems, possibly eliminate redundancies, expansion of each entity's capabilities, and we're open to all ideas. So we kind of like put a blank check out saying, hey, how do you guys think we can make this happen? And last time, we're looking to put together. I snuck another one in. On you. Standardbred Racing Regulators Retreat. We're trying to put one together for the fall of 2015. Possible locations, Toronto, Canada. It's contingent on the ability of regulators to attend. Sometimes that's a little challenging given that people sometimes are not allowed to leave the borders of their states. We're going to be reaching out to the USTA to help us work on an agenda, and we'd love to have you involved. If anybody wants to chase me down and complain about something, that's how you get me.
Thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed before he leaves? You have a comment? All right, President Langley.
I think from where we were a couple years ago, our position with Ed's organization is a lot stronger, and I think that they appreciated our efforts to contest certain medications, certain rules. I think we did it in a gentlemanly manner, and the final result of their scientific committee, getting Dr. Sams, Dr. Tobin, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Stanley, Dr. Malin, and Dr. McKeever, should make us, as a harness racing industry, feel very comfortable, but that in the future, none of these crazy rules affecting harness racing are going to be passed without a lot of thought. Now, if after they decide that something's wrong and we're subject to it, that's fine. But at least I think we're going to get 100% cooperation in the near future, and I appreciate that.
I just want everybody to know our model rules. We have a section that is separate and different for standardbred racing, and we will probably do the same for quarter horse racing. So the things that you've been advocated are certainly consistent with the way we've structured our model rules.
Again, thank you very much, Ed, for your presentation and comments today. Our last speaker, and naturally not least, Jay Hickey. The good thing about Jay, well, he's got a lot of good things, but he's the president of the American Horse Council since 1993. He's our representative in Washington, and while he's a lawyer, he's our lawyer when he represents us. His firm, prior to joining AHC, specialized in representing corporations, associations before Congress. One of their clients was the American Horse Council, and somehow they sucked him away from his law firm. While in private practice, he also represented other clients, including sports organizations, equine organizations, individual horse owners and breeders. I don't want to say it's the best thing about him today, but he speaks from kind of the heart because he has no presentation to go through, right? Right. So I introduce James Hickey. Thank you.
That way everybody can see me better. I actually left the outhouse from the firm and went to the American Horse Council to in-house, so I think it was a step up. I want to, as everybody I hope knows, the American Horse Council represents the horse industry in Washington, D.C. before Congress and the regulatory agencies. We were organized in 1969 in USTA. Corwin Nixon was there then, and these three gentlemen have continued to be with us, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and update you briefly. As you know, the Republicans took over Congress in November. President Obama is in the White House, so we have a split governance system, which has worked fairly well in the past and seems to be the way the American people like it. Now, whether it's going to work this time, I'm not so sure. We're not off to the best start, that's for sure. But it's important to be involved with Congress because what they do, unlike a state, affects all across the country, whether it's gambling, whether it's recreation, whether it's taxes, which are very important, whether it's disease outbreaks, movement of horses, all of that Congress and the U.S. Department of Agriculture has authority over. So I want to just talk about some legislation that passed right at the end of last Congress, and also some legislation that we expect to be introduced in this Congress. And I think it's going to be a fascinating Congress for the horse industry because there's a lot of things that will be discussed that involve us. I'm not saying that a lot is going to get done or passed, but I think it's going to be very interesting. The good news is that the federal government, I hope everybody agrees, will stay open through September 30. In the lame duck in December, they passed the appropriations, the so-called Cromnibus bill, which was CR added to Omnibus, and they came up with Cromnibus. Have to have all these acronyms. Is it acronyms? Acronyms. So the only thing that wasn't passed was the Department of Homeland Security, which they wanted to hold up because of the president's executive actions on immigration. We just went through that rigmarole. They extended it for 1 week, and now they've extended it through September 30. So the government will stay open through the September 30, the fiscal year. At the end, next is the debt limit, which I think will come up maybe in August, which will be interesting if it is, because that'll be the congressional break. And that's where the debt will go above the ceiling that's been imposed by Congress, and that will be the next thing that will lead us to staying up till midnight to see whether, or some of us staying up till midnight to see whether they'll pass it. The next thing is the Tax Increase Prevention Act. This is very important. It was passed right at the end in a lame duck session in December. 3 provisions which have been applicable to the horse industry for the last 8 to 10 years. Section 179, expense deduction, bonus depreciation, and 3-year depreciation of racehorses were all extended for 2014. So the 179 expense deduction, which had dropped to $25,000, and this means that you can deduct immediately up to that amount, had gone down to $25,000, was reinstated at $500,000 for 2014, retroactively to January 1. Bonus depreciation, which had expired, went back to 50% for 14, and racehorses, which we had to go back for 14 under the old system, 3 or 7 years, depending on age when placed in service, was extended retroactively for 3 years. So the 14 is still an open tax year, so make sure that you know about these things, or your accountants, or whoever does your tax returns. It's only for 2014. They've all reverted or expired for 15. Now, it's possible that December 2015, Congress will do the same thing. But be aware of this. If you just go on the Horse Council website, it explains all that. It's a very important tax provision. They're very good benefits. It's not the best way for businesses to plan to change the laws in December. It's better than not doing it, but it's not the best way. But in any event, for 14, an open tax year, all the good tax provisions are still where they used to be. Another bill that passed, which you may not even know about, is veterinarians do house calls. Thank God. They come to the farm, they come to the track, they come to the show, they come to wherever you might have your horses. 2 years ago, the Food and Drug Enforcement Administration changed their position under the Controlled Substance Act with respect to vets. They said that they couldn't take their controlled substances out of their clinic on their trucks to and off-site and care for the horses. Fortunately, the American Association of Equine Practitioners, American Veterinary Medical Association, American Horse Council, and Congressman Kurt Schrader and Ted Yoho, both vets, introduced legislation clarifying that vets could do that. It was passed last Congress, so your vets can still do house calls, thank God. Another proposal is the Equestrian Helmet Safety Act. A little girl named Kristen O'Donnell fell off her horse in 1998 in a ring in Connecticut, and she died. She was killed because she was wearing a hunt cap. Since then, her mother, Kimmy O'Donnell, has been approaching Connecticut senators and Connecticut congressmen saying, I want you to introduce, and they have, legislation that would prohibit the sale of helmets that don't meet minimum standards. It would not apply to organizations. It would not mandate the use of helmets. It would apply to only the manufacturers. It would have directed the Consumer Product Safety Commission to look into equestrian helmets and come up with a standard. It had very bad findings. When Congress passes a bill, they say because A, B, C, D. The findings were just awful. We would not want them codified because the trial lawyers would then just cite all of these statistics when they brought a lawsuit, among other things. It would also scare hell out of any parent who was thinking about having their children ride. The American Horse Council talked about this at our convention, and our committee said, we've got to change this bill or we can't support it. They said, if you can get the Consumer Product Safety Commission out of the equation, we don't want them mucking around with what the standards are for equestrian helmets. If you can change the findings, we may be able to support it. We've met with Ms. O'Donnell, and the sponsors only want to deal with hunt caps. These are just the velvet hunt caps, which they fear that not the helmets that you guys wear, that and ladies. If we can somehow define it to apply only there, we can support the legislation. They don't want to hurt the industry. They only want to deal with this, and we had a good meeting with them just 2 weeks ago, and we're hopeful that we can work this legislation out before it's introduced. Welfare issues, as they have been, are going to be big again in this Congress. The horse slaughter / processing for human consumption bill will be reintroduced. It has not been yet. Interestingly, Senator Landrieu from Louisiana and Congressman Moran from Virginia are both out of Congress now, so they're going to need to get a new sponsor. Prohibition on transporting horses in double-deck trucks has been introduced by Steve Cohen of Tennessee. We support that legislation provided it's changed so that rodeo, which has been transporting their broncs and horses on double-deck trucks for decades, is taken care of, and it doesn't apply to them. Legislation to amend the Horse Protection Act dealing with the Tennessee walking horse issue. If any of you are familiar with that continuing, ongoing 40-year problem, that will be reintroduced shortly. And the legislation that Ed Martin just mentioned, the federal legislation, which would put, in prior Congresses, it was U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, involved the Interstate Horse Racing Act. We expect that will be introduced. And the change there is that the Jockey Club, the Thoroughbred Breed Registry, in their meeting in August said, we're going to work for federal legislation. They're going to continue, they said, to work in other things. The federal approach is just one arrow in their quiver, but that's going to be a little or a big wrinkle in difference. I'm not aware of any other organization that supports a federal approach with respect to racing and medication. Immigration reform. H-2As, H-2Bs, undocumented workers in the horse industry. We're like many, many other industries. We need foreign workers. We need a way for our existing workers, undocumented, illegal, to be legalized. Senate passed a terrific bill in the sense of the old days where the Republicans said this, the Democrats said that. They sat down we'll change this, we'll give you something there, how about that? And worked out a bill, just like it used to be 10 years ago in terms of bipartisan negotiation. The Senate passed it, it never went anywhere in the House, and Congress left, so it's going to have to start all over again. You saw the problems with DHS, which was based upon what the president did, which in November he said, I'm going to direct the Department of DHS, Homeland Security, to allow for deferred deportation for certain illegal aliens here now. Parents of U.S. citizens because they were born here or resident aliens, children who were brought here before January 2010. That is now in limbo because the Texas court has said that he exceeded his authority, and the Department of Justice has appealed it. But comprehensive immigration reform is still one of our primary goals. Whether it happens is going to be very difficult to see. Something that just happened about 5-6 days ago, the Department of Labor and USCIS has stopped approving and reviewing H-2B applications. So if you have an application because you need someone for H-2B, low-skilled, non-agricultural work, they are not approving them now. It's all industries. It's caused a huge uproar among the H-2B community. We've contacted all of our friends in Congress saying, do something, tell DOL that it's pursuant to a court decision, which didn't say stop processing, it just said change it. But if you're waiting for H-2Bs, I'm sure you already know, they're not doing that now, and hopefully we've been caught in a bad situation. All industries have. Hopefully they'll get back to doing that. The next thing is gaming and internet legislation. This is going to be, I think, fascinating, and maybe it just shows how far gone I am, I don't know. But everybody likes to gamble. Everybody has an interest in this more than just racing because it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. Internet gambling is illegal in the United States because of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, which prohibits interstate gambling, except on horse racing. We've got an exclusion from that, and we can continue to do that. Since that was passed in 2006, people who want to regulate it have been introducing bills to legalize it and regulate it. They've never gone anywhere. I mean, about 10 bills have been introduced over the last 4 or 5 Congresses. All of those bills had exceptions for parimutuel racing had they gotten legs and moved it somewhere. Sports betting. Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was passed in 1992 by the leagues to say that you cannot do sports betting in the United States except for Nevada, except for Delaware for parlay cards, and they gave New Jersey 2 years to pass legislation, which they did not do. New Jersey has now legalized sports betting in New Jersey. They've filed suit and saying that Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA, is unconstitutional. All the courts have said, no, it is constitutional, but it's still in the court system. And the leagues, the professional sport leagues, NCAA, have opposed New Jersey's effort. There's been 2 bills introduced to legalize sports betting, one by Mr. Pallone from New Jersey, which would legalize it for New Jersey, one by Mr. Lobiondo from New Jersey, which would give all states 4 years to legalize it. They've just been introduced. Nothing's been happened on it yet. The third part of this equation is that 3 years ago, the Department of Justice, which for many, many years had said that the federal wire statute, 1084, prohibits all forms of interstate wagering, including slots, casino games, poker, craps, etc. And 3 years ago, they reinterpreted that and said that no, it only prohibits sports betting on professional amateur sports. Since that's what sort of led to the states trying to legalize craps, slots, etc. On the internet. Congressman Jason Chaffetz from Utah has introduced a bill that would roll that back to say all forms of wagering are illegal under the federal wire statute. Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina introduced it last year, and we expected him to reintroduce it this year. Now, the thing that's interesting about all of this, and you've got three equations. You've got prohibition on internet gambling, prohibition on sports betting, and a strange or a new interpretation by the Department of Justice, is that it used to be that you could pretty much predict where all of the people involved in this equation, and there's all sorts of people, are. You can't, in my opinion, you can't do that anymore. And let me just say that there's only one form of gambling that you can offer interstate on the internet, and that is parimutuel racing. And if I may say so, that's because we passed the Interstate Horse Racing Act in 1978, amended it in 2002, and there's an exemption in PASPA for racing. So we are the only ones that can legally do this. But now you've got all sorts of people involved, and some really serious people. As I say, it used to be able to, you could say who was on what side, but now, like the casinos were opposed to internet gaming, then they were for internet gaming, and now they don't know where they are. And I'm not being critical, there's just not any unanimity as to where they are. The elephant in this equation is a fellow named, you probably know him, Sheldon Adelson. Famous for many, many reasons, owns the Sands, is a multi-billionaire. He kept Newt Gingrich single-handedly in the presidential race when Newt had lost a couple, my lookalike, had lost a number of races and had no more money. But he had so much, he has said that he is going to spend, quote, whatever it takes to prohibit internet wagering and to reinstate the DOJ position on saying that you can't do it interstate. He's behind the Chaffetz and Lindsey Graham legislation. He believes that internet gambling would hurt bricks and mortar casinos, and that's his position. Other Las Vegas interests are not so sure. A lot of them want to do internet wagering. Native Americans, they've been relatively silent on sports betting, interstate casino-type games, poker in particular, and I think all they want is to, whatever happens, they want their share. And sports. Sports was rock solid opposed to sports betting when it was passed in 1992, and we were part of that coalition to make sure that racing was excluded. They supported PASPA, and recently, for those of you who have followed this, there's a chink in the wall right now. They're still opposing it in the lawsuits in New Jersey, but David Silver, the new commissioner of the NBA, has said, I think that sports betting, licensed and regulated, is the way to go. And the Rob Manfred, who's the new Major League Baseball commissioner, has said, well, I think we should take a look at this. Now, when people say that we may take a look at it, that means that, I can't imagine he would say that without having his owners, a couple of them, saying, yeah, we should look at this. Gary Bettman of the National Hockey League, he says, well, we're mostly in Canada in terms of betting. We're not really a big part of it, but we'll take a look at it. Now, the NFL is still silent as to where they are. The NCAA is silent, and those are the two important ones. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Racing. In 1992, we were supportive of a ban on sports betting. We didn't know about it, but probably supportive of an interstate wagering on the internet. In 1992, we didn't think about that, on poker, slots, casino games, etc. I'm not sure where we are right now. It may be that there are people in the racing industry that think sports betting is a pretty good idea. Well, I know New Jersey thinks that. It may be that they think, just slots and poker is a good idea. So I'm not sure where the racing industry is. So this is going to be very interesting, or at least I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Congress, they don't have the slightest idea. Senator McCain has said, this is complicated. We need to take a look at this. But I guarantee you that Sheldon Adelson is going to be a big part of this equation because he just has so much money and he is willing to spend it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the American system. Now, in my opinion, it's Congress, you've still got an awful lot of people who are opposed to gambling on sports in Congress, opposed to interstate gaming. It's going to be hard to get some sort of a consensus. So I think there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of hearings on this, but probably no action. Okay. Well, withholding. We have been working for these many years to repeal withholding or change it. We've had legislation introduced, and we decided about 3 years ago, the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, American Horse Council, submitted a letter to Treasury saying, let's rethink how you defined a winning wager so that the way we bet now, pick sixes, exactas, etc., they don't withhold on as many because you have to redefine it. Lots of times you'll win that, and you haven't won that much, but because they only count one bet. One bet, it's 300 to 1 odds. Just 2 days ago or 3 days ago, Treasury proposed regulations to change the reporting on bingo, keno, and slots. And in that proposal, they said, we understand that parimutuel racing has some questions about how they're treated, and we ask for comments from parimutuel. So that is an opportunity for us to submit comments, and we'll come back to you on this, and say, change the way that reporting and withholding on racing is done. And that's the comment period is up June 2nd, and that's a little bit of a forward progress. 1 minute. 1 minute. I just want to mention we also get involved in regulatory matters with the Department of Agriculture. 3 things I want to mention. Saudi Arabia has asked to be removed from the African horse sickness affected list. They submitted documents to USDA. We oppose that. We don't think that it's worth changing the rules with respect to horses from Saudi Arabia to make it less than 60 days because of the danger of African horse sickness, which has a 95% mortality. The comment period is over. The USDA hasn't figured out exactly what they're going to do. The other is there's a movement to have changed the rules on the international movement of high-performance, high-health horses. Not all horses, the horses that they say could move in a bubble. And the OIE, and this is primarily driven by the show industry, but it would affect some of your high performance. Not all of them, but some of your high performance horses, which would be able to travel more easily. So those are some of the things that we're working on. I went through it quickly, but I'm here. Please stop me and ask any questions. And again, I appreciate very much the opportunity. 7 minutes over.
Who had the overs and unders, but thank you very much, Jay. You know, your comments keeping us up to date on what's going on are very valuable to the industry. We are now going to move to the group picture and to lunch, and then to our committee meetings this afternoon. There is a reception from 6:30 to 7:30 out in the Easton foyer. The picture is out this door to the left, and you'll find Mark here, but he'll be out there shortly. I want to thank everyone who has been watching us on streaming for your participation. Hopefully this was, or this provided you some value as to what goes on at the organization. You certainly can continue to contact us with questions that you have on the various presentations and what we discussed, and I thank everyone for their contributions this morning.